my WWE Hell in the Cell 2010 pay-per-view review. As far as this pay-per-view overall, it was more or less what a lot of people were expecting going into this pay-per-view. You only had 2 weeks of pay-per-view build up for this event, so you knew you weren't going to get a great event, so it was more or less a throwaway pay-per-view in my opinion, where you had a few memorable things like Paul Bearer turning on Undertaker, John Cena joined the Nexus. But both of those things, we'll have to wait and see. Are they going to lead to something good as far as John Cena joining the Nexus? What's that going to lead to on Monday Night Raw tonight? And as far as Undertaker and Paul Bearer's relationship and where that feud with Undertaker and Kane is going to further. And as far as the matches on the pay-per-view, I would say you had one very good match, which second pay-per-view in a row, in my opinion, the United States title actually was the best match of the night. So it's actually good saying for a pay-per-view in WWE that 2 pay-per-views back-to-back, the mid-card title, the United States title, is actually starting to try to get a little prestige. Now, just as long as they have Daniel Bryan hold on to this title for a while, they can actually make the mid-card title something prestigious yet again. As far as the other matches on the pay-per-view, really nothing completely terrible on it. The only match I would say was passable and I could have cared less about was the Divas match with Michelle McCool versus Natalya, which actually was going on to be actually a pretty decent women's match. The only thing that ruined it was Layla's involvement at the end of the match, and the match ended in disqualification. So back-to-back, Night of Champions at Hell in the Cell, you were actually going on to have 2 pretty good women's matches on pay-per-view. Not excellent women's matches, but 2 pretty solid women's matches. But at Night of Champions, the Lumberjill stipulation, that ruined it. And then Layla's involvement on here, so you really didn't have a bad match on here. But like I said, it's more or less a throwaway pay-per-view where you have a few good things on it and a few things people would want to see. Undertaker and Kane's match, kind of the same match you saw at Night of Champions, but a little better considering it was the Hell in the Cell and Paul Bearer returning. This could lead to something good, and John Cena joined the Nexus. Like I said, the best match on here, in my opinion, was the United States title match with The Miz versus John Morrison versus Daniel Bryan. So the first match on the pay-per-view was the United States title and a submissions count anywhere match with John Morrison versus The Miz versus the United States champion, Daniel Bryan. This is a good way to start the pay-per-view. A lot of good back-and-forth action in this match. This is more or less the way to sum this match up is it was pretty much a brawl slash, what it was, submissions count anywhere. It was pretty much a brawl around the whole entire arena. Instead of pinfalls, it was submissions, which those were the stipulations in this match. And a lot of innovative stuff in this match. Liked one part in this match, John Morrison and The Miz, they were up in the stands, and there was the railing, and The Miz put John Morrison in a variation of the Dragon Sleeper. At one point in this match, Daniel Bryan and The Miz did some good stuff on the cage, not on the cage, but on the top of the stage. John Morrison did some very innovative stuff in here. He did a lot of good stuff in here. And the end of the match comes when on top of the stage, you see John Morrison. He has The Miz and the Texas Cloverleaf. Alex Riley comes out there pretty much saving The Miz so The Miz won't have to tap out. John Morrison, and then he throws John Morrison. Then Daniel Bryan throws Alex Riley off the stage pretty much into that cameraman. Then Daniel Bryan, he goes up to The Miz, trying to put him in a submission maneuver. Miz fights it off first. Then Daniel Bryan ends up finally putting him into the label lock, and The Miz taps out. And I would say a 3.5-star match. A very good way to start the pay-per-view. And in my opinion, the best match on the show was the opening match here with Daniel Bryan versus John Morrison and The Miz. Very good stuff. All of them worked very well with each other, and really good way to start the pay-per-view, and very entertaining match. Like I said, 3.5 stars. And then the next matchup was Sheamus versus Randy Orton in a Hell in a Cell match for the WWE Championship, and this is more or less the type of match you've seen with them two before. Thankfully, in this match, I know I wasn't the only one. I know a lot of other people were kind of worried that this was going to be one of those Hell in a Cell matches, kind of like what Randy Orton's match was at last year's Hell in a Cell, where he pretty much had a match inside of Hell in a Cell, which was just a regular wrestling match. They actually utilized the cage in here, and I would say, these two have pretty good chemistry now. They cannot put on classic matches or, match of the year candidates or anything like that, but they put on pretty solid, enjoyable matches. And Thankfully, this time, this is the third time they took on each other this year on pay-per-view, first being at the Royal Rumble, which ended, I think, in a count-out or disqualification. SummerSlam, it ended in disqualification. This time, you actually finally had a winner, actually finally ended in a pinfall. Towards the end of the match, you saw, in this match, Sheamus, he hit 2 bicycle kicks. Actually, before he hit the second one outside the ring, Randy Orton was going for the punt kick. Sheamus got out of the way, hit the bicycle kick, got him inside the ring, only got a 2 count. Then there was steel steps inside the ring, and Sheamus, he tried to go for his Razor's Edge, the Celtic Cross move on Randy Orton. Randy Orton got out of it, and then Randy Orton, at the end of the match, on the steel steps, he hits his RKO to Sheamus. So Randy Orton retains the WWE Championship in a pretty fun Hell in a Cell match. It wasn't a great Hell in a Cell match, but pretty solid and fun, enjoyable match. 3 stars, and it was for what it was pretty entertaining, I would say. Then the next matchup was, well, actually before the next matchup, you saw Alberto Del Rio. He came out here, he cut a little promo. Edge came out there. Them two shared words back and forth with each other. Then Jack Swagger came out there, and Jack Swagger and Alberto Del Rio pretty much beat down Edge. Then Michael Cole did his little bullshit where I got an email from the anonymous GM, and it read, Edge, tomorrow night on Monday Night Raw, which is tonight, you'll have to apologize to the anonymous GM for what you did last week and making it official, Jack Swagger versus Edge in a pay-per-view match on Hell in a Cell right here. And this match, when it got announced on here, I was looking forward to it. I was thinking, man, this is going to be something very good and possibly could be a show stealer. Unfortunately, you could tell within the match that both Jack Swagger and Edge going into the match must have been told to go out there, have a fun little match, have an enjoyable match, but don't have, something that's going to be like a classic match or a match that's going to steal the show. You can tell they were told to hold back a lot in here, which that's what it seemed like. It seemed like a TV match on pay-per-view, which is very unacceptable. When you got a pay-per-view, even though this is a match that just got added at the last minute, it's not like it's going to increase pay-per-view buys either way, even though Jack Swagger and Edge are both great in-ring performers. Not a match that's going to increase pay-per-view buys, but still, this is a match that they should have went out there and, balls to the wall and performed at their fullest ability, which unfortunately they didn't do so. It was a disappointing match. Edge wins the match after he pretty much hits the spear out of nowhere. So, for this match, it was enjoyable for what it was, and it was a decent match, but it felt like just a TV quality match on a pay-per-view, which, like I said, is pretty unacceptable when you got a pay-per-view for WWE, even though it's a match that, just got added on the last minute. So I would give it 2.5 stars. It was okay for what it was, but a bit disappointing. I was expecting a whole lot more from it. Then the next matchup was Wade Barrett versus John Cena, and the stipulations for this match went, if John Cena loses this match, he has to join the Nexus, and if Wade Barrett loses this match, the Nexus have to disband. And this was a fun match. This was actually, I would say, as far as the way the crowd was into this match, this was the most heated contest of the night. The one match, other than probably Undertaker and Kane later on, that was probably the match the crowd was into the most. This match, the crowd was into pretty much from beginning to end in this whole entire match. Good back and forth action. I would say John Cena in this match put over Wade Barrett in this match. Wade Barrett looked the best he's ever been, and pretty entertaining match. It wasn't a classic wrestling match, but it was good. It was a pretty entertaining match. That's the one thing with John Cena. Even though sometimes he doesn't have a great wrestling match, he can always go out there and perform and have a pretty entertaining match. And that's what this was. The crowd was really into this. There were back and forth chants, mostly, let's go Cena, but, you heard let's go Wade Barrett chants as well, which it's good that Wade Barrett's kind of getting over, which kind of with that, you can tell, those are the most fans that, chant Cena sucks. Those are the people that are cheering for Wade Barrett. And within this match, you saw the Nexus members come out there. Now, obviously, they cannot interfere in this match because they interfere. Nexus have to disband, and John Cena wins the match. So Wade Barrett was telling them, do not get involved. Don't do anything stupid here. And at the end of the match, you saw 2, what they term fans, get involved in this match, cost John Cena the match, and Wade Barrett wins the match, so John Cena has to join the Nexus. Now, as far as the 2 fans, one of them I almost can pretty much say 100% that I knew who it was, which was Michael McGillicuddy, a.k.a. Joe Hanning of Nexus Season 2. And the other one, it's kind of getting unconfirmed. It's kind of unconfirmed, and I'm not sure if it was, but I think the second person was Husky Harris. So those are the two names I'm hearing what the two fans that interfere, which the first one I'm almost 100% sure it was Joe Henning, a.k.a. Michael McGillicuddy. The second one I'm not completely sure if it was Husky Harris or not, but looks like, Husky Harris and Joe Henning or, Michael McGillicuddy are now going to be members of the Nexus as well, so that's something good for them. Those are the two guys from Nexus Season 2 other than Caval that I like the most, and Husky Harris actually I probably like the most other than, the person I already knew, which was Caval, which thankfully, now they're finally going to be doing something with both of them. So looks like they're going to be parts of the Nexus. John Cena's now going to be with the Nexus. Now, don't expect John Cena to turn heel. That's not going to happen. What they're going to do is John Cena is going to be reluctant, not wanting to be a part of it, and he's pretty much going to destroy it from within and possibly have the whole Nexus stable end maybe at the Survivor Series pay-per-view. Or who knows, maybe it might last a little longer, but considering, Survivor Series probably be the perfect time if they want to have the whole Nexus angle end. That'll probably be the perfect time to end it. I don't think they'll end it at Bragging Rights, because Bragging Rights is going to be another pay-per-view, kind of like Hell in the Cell here, where it's only going to have 2-3 weeks of build-up, where it's going to be pretty much booked as a throwaway event. So I would think they would save the whole finishing of the Nexus stable at Survivor Series, or who knows, maybe they might have it go on a little longer, especially with possibly, Michael McGillicuddy and now Husky Harris being with it. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with John Cena within it, but obviously they're not going to have him turn heel. He's going to be reluctant, not want to be a part of it, and that's the way they're going to do it. After the match, I would say John Cena did an excellent job of going after the match, selling the fact that, this was one of the worst things that ever happened to him, the saddest day in WWE history, and he kind of put that over very well. I think the announcers did a decent job with that as well. As far as the match with Wade Barrett and John Cena, I would give it 3 stars just because of, they had a pretty good match. Wade Barrett was actually kind of made into a star, even though John Cena didn't lose the match cleanly. But even though he didn't lose it cleanly, I would say Wade Barrett was actually put over as a star in this match and made to look like he actually meant something. So that's something good right there. And it's going to be interesting to see where they lead to this next with the whole Nexus stable against WWE. We'll have to just wait and see where that's going to lead to on tonight's Monday night. And as far as the match, I would give it probably 2 3/4, maybe 3 stars. It was good for what it was. It wasn't an excellent match, but like I said, it was an entertaining match. Then the next matchup was the Unified Divas Championship match with Michelle McCool versus Natalya. And this was actually going on to be a pretty good women's match. You saw some good back-and-forth action. I was really getting into this. Then they had to end this match in probably the worst disqualification ending I've probably ever seen. The match ends with Layla throwing her shoes in the match, and the match gets in disqualification. While she was when she threw the shoes, Natalya had Michelle McCool and the sharpshooter in this match. And I was hoping that Natalya was going to win here. I knew she wouldn't. And they ended it in probably the worst way they could, which was the DQ finish. So that kind of hurt the match. For what it was going on to be a pretty good match, but the ending killed it for me with the DQ finish, and probably the worst DQ type of finish I've ever seen. And I would give it 1.5 stars. If it wasn't for the DQ finish and would have actually had a better finish to it, it could have been one of those women's matches that could have actually got, close to 2.5 stars. So it was going on pretty good. It was a pretty good women's match, and I'm a huge fan of Natalya, so it's good seeing her get showcased on a pay-per-view. I'm just hoping they continue showcasing her. The other women's wrestler I'm a huge fan of that doesn't get used in the way they should, which is Gail Kim. I know a lot of people know I'm a huge fan of Gail Kim, so hopefully they try to use her at some point, but it's good seeing Natalya Neidhart get showcased on here. It was a pretty decent women's match for what it was. Like I said, the ending with the disqualification was the thing that hurt it for me, though. And then the main event was for the World Heavyweight Championship and a Hell in a Cell match, Undertaker versus Kane. And this was pretty much the same type of match you saw at the Night of Champions pay-per-view about 2 weeks ago. But I would say the Hell in a Cell gimmick of this match definitely helped it a whole lot. And you saw some good stuff, and it was enjoyable for what it was. It wasn't a great match. Just what you saw in a lot of these matches, what you're hearing me say is, a lot of these matches were kind of enjoyable for what they were, but they weren't anything spectacular or anything great, which with the pay-per-view, I would say you kind of need to have some of those. Not saying you have to have 5-star match of the year candidates and all that, have every single match be like that, but you have to have a little better quality than what you had here. Undertaker and Kane, it was good for what it was. The ending of it, some people might say was kind of cheesy, but it fits in with the whole Undertaker being, the supernatural stuff and all that type of stuff, where at the end of the match, Paul Bearer, he gets in the ring because Not Undertaker, but Kane hits the tombstone, only gets a 2 count. He gets pissed off at the ref, disbelief that Undertaker kicked out there, knocks the ref out. Then they have to open the cage. Then Paul Bearer gets in there. Then Paul Bearer gets in the ring. Kane pretty much forces him to get in the ring. And then he opens up the urn, lights go out and stuff, and pretty much, I guess, selling that Paul Bearer took the soul of Undertaker, and now he's aligning himself with Kane. You know, kind of cheesy ending, but it fits with Undertaker's character and the whole supernatural stuff. They've done this type of stuff for a long time. I know some people might say, it's a little cheesy, kind of stupid ending, but it fits with the Undertaker character. So at least it fits with the Undertaker character. Makes sense right there. So Kane retains the championship. After that, he gets the urn from Paul Bearer, hits Undertaker with it, and then hits a choke slam to retain the championship. And I would say maybe a 2 3/4 star match. It was a decent match for what it was. It was a whole lot better than their match at Night of Champions. Like I said, the Hell in the Cell gimmick really helped them out, and they did utilize the cage, which was something good, seeing that in both of the Hell in the Cell matches they did utilize the cage in the match, which thankfully they didn't do what they did last year, because I remember won a match last year, Randy Orton's match, didn't even utilize the cage. So both matches utilized the cage, did some good stuff. Now, the one thing most people are going to complain about, you didn't see blood in this match. Well, you did see Kane get a cut in the back of his head in this match. He got busted open the hard way, but other than that, you didn't see blood in either of the Hell in the Cell matches, which I know some people like. In these type of matches, I'm not one of those people that say you need blood all the time, but in a Hell in a Cell match, in a brutal match like that, you kind of do need it. And it's one of those times WWE should, look past the no blood policy and say, let's just do it for this. Just use it on special occasions. And Orton and Sheamus didn't need it. I would say Undertaker and Kane possibly could have helped out even more if they would have had some blood involved in it, other than, Kane's little cut he had on the back of his head where he was bleeding a little in the match, but that was busted open the hard way. As far as the pay-per-view, I'll probably give it a 6 out of 10. It was pretty much a throwaway pay-per-view from WWE, but had some entertaining stuff with it. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with John Cena, how they're going to do the whole him join the Nexus. Obviously, they're not going to have him turn heel. I know a lot of people will love to see John Cena turn heel, but it's not going to happen. Don't even expect it to happen. Paul Bearer turning on The Undertaker. Kind of saw that coming a little bit, because I did mention that in my preview. I thought, either Undertaker was going to win the title, or if he did lose, Paul Bearer would cost him and screw him in the match, which that ended up happening. And the match of the night was the United States title with The Miz versus John Morrison versus Daniel Bryan. So it wasn't a terrible pay-per-view, but for a pay-per-view that only had 2 weeks of build, it's kind of what you would expect. A pay-per-view that's pretty much a throwaway pay-per-view, which seems like a lot of WWE pay-per-views this year are either, subpar, average, throwaways, nothing too special other than maybe a couple pay-per-views this year from WWE. So they need to increase, the quality of their pay-per-view, make it seem like every pay-per-view is going to be something great, especially considering fans are supposed to go out their way, spend $45, or if you don't spend it, you got streams and stuff like that. But WWE needs to go out their way to, either, make sure the pay-per-view quality is the best they can do, lower the number of pay-per-views. I think is the one option they need to do at some point. And I think with some of these pay-per-views, especially Hell in the Cell, only having 2 weeks of 2 weeks of build for the pay-per-view, I expect a very low buy rate. And if some of these gimmick-based pay-per-views, which they need to stop doing so many gimmick-based pay-per-views and so many pay-per-views every single year, and I think they might get that message at some point, because if the pay-per-view buy rates are very low and not to what they used to be, WWE is going to have to change their way they model their pay-per-views and the way they put together and book their pay-per-views at some point or another, unless they just want to, keep doing this until they get really bad buy rates. Like I said, I give this pay-per-view a 6 out of 10. Wasn't a terrible pay-per-view, wasn't a great pay-per-view. I would say it's just a throwaway pay-per-view where you had a few good things on it. And yeah, that's it for my WWE Hell in a Cell 2010 pay-per-view review eyepiece. Kind of the same match you saw at Night of Champions, but a little better considering it was the Hell in the Cell and Paul Bearer returning. This could lead to something good, and John Cena joined the Nexus. Like I said, the best match on here, in my opinion, was the United States title match with The Miz versus John Morrison versus Daniel Bryan. So the first match on the pay-per-view was the United States title and a submissions count anywhere match with John Morrison versus The Miz versus the United States champion, Daniel Bryan. This is a good way to start the pay-per-view. Actually starting to try to get a little prestige. Now, just as long as they have Daniel Bryan hold on to this title for a while, they could actually make the mid-card title something prestigious yet again. As far as the other matches on the pay-per-view, really nothing completely terrible on it. The only match I would say was passable and I could care less about was the Divas match with Michelle McCool versus Natalya, which actually was going on to be actually a pretty decent women's match. The only thing that ruined it was Layla's involvement at the end of the match. The match ended in disqualification as John Cena joined the Nexus. What's that going to lead to on Monday Night Raw tonight? And as far as Undertaker and Paul Bearer's relationship and where that feud with Undertaker and Kane is going to further. And as far as the matches on the pay-per-view, I would say you had one very good match, which second pay-per-view in a row, in my opinion, the United States title actually was the best match of the night. So it's actually good saying for a pay-per-view in WWE that two pay-per-views back-to-back, the mid-card title, the United States title qualification. So back-to-back, Night of Champions at Hell in a Cell, you were actually going on to have two pretty good women's matches on pay-per-view. Not excellent women's matches, but two pretty solid women's matches. But at Night of Champions, the Lumberjill stipulation, that ruined it. And then Layla's involvement on here. So you really didn't have a bad match on here. But like I said, it's more or less a throwaway pay-per-view where you have a few good things on it and a few things people would want to see. Undertaker and Kane's match. My WWE Hell in a Cell 2010 pay-per-view review. As far as this pay-per-view overall, it was more or less what a lot of people were expecting going into this pay-per-view. You only had 2 weeks of pay-per-view build up for this event, so you knew you weren't going to get a great event, so it was more or less a throwaway pay-per-view in my opinion, where you had a few memorable things like Paul Bearer turning on Undertaker, John Cena joined the Nexus. But both of those things, we'll have to wait and see. Are they going to lead to something good as